Does your partner or your ex have borderline personality disorder, or are they just an avoidant? Well, it can be tough to tell, especially when it comes to fearful avoidance. Fearful avoidant behavior is very similar to borderline personality disorder behavior, but they are not the same thing. Both have a disorganized attachment style, meaning they both have an anxious attachment as well as an avoidant attachment, and they will behave accordingly with whichever attachment style is triggered at the time, which fears are triggered. Is their partner pulling away from them? They're likely to behave in a more anxious way. If emotional intimacy is growing, they're more likely to behave in an avoidant way. Borderlines will exhibit much more extreme behavior than fearful avoidance. Borderlines typically will have this kind of behavior permeate into other aspects of their life, not just romantic relationships, where fearful avoidants are more likely to behave in this way in a romantic relationship. Early on in the romantic relationship, both borderlines and fearful avoidants are very well known for love bombing, very intense early relationship gestures. You may feel like you met your person, you met your match, and you have just been swept off of your feet. But as emotional intimacy grows, both will have their avoidant fears triggered. Fears of abandonment, fears of rejection, fears of engulfment. And both will find ways to create emotional distance between themselves and their partner. This can be in the form of cheating, causing fights. It can be stonewalling, gaslighting, ghosting, all these behaviors they can both exhibit. However, it's going to be much more volatile and come with much more in the way of extreme emotional swings with somebody who has a borderline personality disorder. A fearful avoidant will be much more equipped to regulate their behavior in front of others. Borderlines also are prone to self-harm, such as cutting, suicidal tendencies, or suicidal attempts. And they are also more prone to something that is called splitting. They can go from love bombing a partner to completely shutting down and taking that person off of the pedestal when their fears of abandonment are triggered. Now, this can come across pretty abrupt with a fearful avoidant too, so that part can be very difficult to detect. But it's going to always be much more extreme with somebody who has borderline personality disorder. Keep in mind, they both have disorganized attachment. So the behaviors are going to be very similar, but it is the extreme behaviors on the side of the borderline that'll really distinguish them from somebody who is simply fearful avoidant. And just like a fearful avoidant, a borderline will often try to come back after the relationship is ended and no contact is used, because their anxious attachment will be triggered by the no contact, just like a fearful avoidant would experience it. So it can be very, very confusing, but here's the thing to really understand. If your partner is behaving in a dysregulated way, if they're hot and cold and hot and cold, and sending you constant mixed messages, if they're doing behaviors like gaslighting, stonewalling, cheating, creating arguments out of thin air to make you feel like you're being devalued like a narcissist would, does it really ultimately matter whether this person has a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder or if they're just extremely avoidantly attached in a fearful avoidant way? Does it really matter? Because you're being treated in a way that you don't deserve. Now, the caveat is that somebody that is a fearful avoidant can learn to become secure through therapy and a lot of self-work, which should include deep self-reflection and a commitment to a behavioral change. Borderline personality disorder people will always have borderline personality disorder. They can learn to regulate their behaviors in a healthy way, and therapy is a very good thing for them, but that disorder will always be present. Whereas a fearful avoidant can learn to become a securely attached person, because attachment styles are just learned behaviors. They are not a mental or emotional or personality disorder of any kind. It's not a diagnosable condition. It's a learned behavior that goes back to childhood, especially with the fearful avoidant, where they were emotionally neglected but also experienced some sort of chaos in their early life. So they learn to develop an avoidant attachment, the fear of emotional intimacy, the fear of abandonment, rejection, and engulfment. And they also learn to develop an anxious attachment, which also has a fear of abandonment. And the anxious person will be the person that comes across most often early in the relationship when it's new and they have a fear of losing this person, but they have the fear that's triggered in an anxious way. Over the course of time, as emotional intimacy builds, and this person will, the avoidance partner will reveal their flaws over time, this will cause the fearful avoidant to have their avoidant side triggers where they pull away and create emotional distance. The same behavior can happen from a borderline, but look for the extremes. See if this is a really, really extreme mood swing, if there's a history of self-harm or addiction that might point towards someone having a personality disorder rather than just a severe avoidant attachment. At the end of the day, if you're being mistreated, you're being mistreated. If you are neglecting your own wants and needs to walk on eggshells to cater to somebody who has shown themselves to be severely insecure, that's still an unhealthy dynamic, regardless of whether your partner has avoidant personality, has avoidant attachment, or if they have borderline personality disorder. At the end of the day, respect your boundaries, respect yourself, and ask yourself, am I being treated in the way I deserve? If you don't, it might be time to hold some boundaries and know your worth, because you don't deserve to be treated in a poor way.